Thanks for having me. What a pleasure, Dr. Smith and Jay. We consider you all in the FMMA, in our group, kind of the rock stars of healthcare reform. And really, that's where I've learned much of what I'm going to share with you, and much of what I do in my role and goal, my responsibility, which is primarily recruiting, training, and motivating agents and brokers throughout the United States of America. We're currently, our insurance company, we are currently in about 27 states. And I feel like every day I'm on a mission rather than peddling product. The story that we're telling is educating brokers and agents about a new way of doing things. And that includes direct primary care. That includes the Christian sharing model in the faith-based community where individuals qualify. And we really believe that we are by educating the broker, and we have many boots on the ground, and then the broker educating the consumer, what we're doing is, in effect, telling your story, and that's my hope, because I'm encouraged with what I hear from many in the room, and I can't wait to meet more of you. Vance, the DPC provider from Kansas, and Dr. Lee Gross. I mean, it's amazing when you hear these stories, when you see people being bilked out of thousands of dollars, and in their mind's eye thinking that their only alternative is to buy expensive traditional major medical insurance to comply. And then these plans don't actually do much. I feel that it's a travesty. I would also be remiss if I didn't recognize that we have some guests in the room, and maybe what I would consider to be a mentor in the insurance business who's made a very bold statement, and that is the CEO and founder of New Era Life Insurance Companies in Philadelphia, American, Dr. Bill Chen. Thank you for being here. Dr. Chen, he's an actuarial scientist. He's a smart guy. I barely graduated high school, so I'm a marketer, Our executive vice president, I think that's Mary Frazier's name, or title. I know Mary's name. Thank you, Mary, for being here. And then many of my team leaders, thank you. But these guys, they have also, like many of you, they've taken a bold step outside of the box. They're not doing things in a traditional fashion. And so I'm honored to be on their team, and I'm honored to tell our story and share it with you. And again, I wish to reaffirm that our goal is to really educate the consumer. That was one of the first things Dr. Chen ever said to me in a fairly large meeting. He said to a room of brokers that our number one goal is to educate the consumer, because that's how we're going to affect change, from the bottom up rather than from the top down. So what a privilege. Thank you guys for that. So my topic today is Christian sharing and free market medicine. And I think I have a clicker here, and I remember green is forward and red is back. So we're going to roll, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. And hopefully, everybody gets some value out of the time that we spend together, okay? So again, with that, let's talk about the rules of communication and kind of where we're at, or where we've come from. Part of the specificity with which I want to engage and teach agents and brokers, and things that I think can help us all make a difference. And that is rule number one. The first art of communication, right, is the definition of terms. If you read any contract, there's always the deck page and, the agreements and what you're going to give and what you're going to get. But somewhere in an insurance contract, certainly, is the definition of terms, where everything is defined. This is what we mean when we say thus and such. And I'm sure that you deal with a lot of the same in your work. One of the things that I stress, and I think that this will resonate with you, is that health care is not health insurance. And health insurance is not health care. I've been at this for a long time. I lived through the 90s with the Clintons and where the early narrative began to be developed about health care reform. And you remember where they would, pull individuals who were struggling with various anomalies on television and say, this is why we need health care reform, et cetera, et cetera. But if you noticed, the government is going after, or it has redefined the insurance industry, not necessarily health care. Health care reform is what is occurring in Oklahoma City. Health care reform is what is occurring in Dr. Lee Gross's facility and many others just like it. So we stress in the community, when I'm educating brokers, I let them know, please, don't miss this and help consumers to see, because just like if you've ever watched The Matrix, we want people to unplug. We want to re-educate them and help them see some of the folly of the narrative. It's fundamental to understand today these simple basics. Insurance is different from healthcare, and what you're going to see a little later on is that insurance really, in terms of the patient-provider relationship, which we believe is paramount, chief, above almost everything. Insurance is really not necessary, and we'll get to that. But healthcare is a patient-provider relationship. Again, one of the things that Dr. Chen stresses to all of his leaders in the field, how important it is to have a good relationship with your provider. I will tell you, I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, actually a little city outside of Pittsburgh called Cannonsburg. Perry Como, Bobby Vincent, those are our famous ones from there. But I use a direct primary care facility called Paragon Personal Health Care. My doc is Rebecca Plute. And she made the plunge. She graduated from Penn State. And I said, Doc, how did you get into this? How did you wind up here? We were doing some radio shows together. And she said, Tom, I became a doctor because I wanted to care for people. That's her heart. She loves it. She's a fantastic human being. But she said the traditional model, the corporate model, was such that it seemed that 80% of my time was spent on compliance and medical billing and all of these issues to run a practice, and 20% on care. And she said, today with my current model, it's exactly the opposite. And I will tell you, I was just in her office the other day, and I look at my watch a lot because when I'm there, I'm getting texts and I hear my phone over there dinging, and it makes me a little anxious. But I think, the average office visit with Doc is an hour and 10 minutes. And it's a great relationship. We can, I text her, we talk. She knows actually I feel like sometimes she knows more about me than I wish. Like, okay, what are you eating and how's the diet? And remember, we said a couple of glasses of wine, not a couple of bottles of wine, these kinds of things. But it's a great relationship. And so these are issues that we're stressing with the broker community and then again with the consumer. So healthcare is not insurance. Rule number 2, in order to come to a sound conclusion, and a mentor of mine years ago did a whole class on thinking, right? And he said, Tom, to come to a sound conclusion, you have to begin with the proper premise. And he defined thought process as premise, superstructure, which is the facts, the figures, 2 + 2 equals, and then the conclusion. And what he affirmed is that if the premise is wrong, the superstructure can be right, but you still may come to a faulty conclusion. And so I think the other thing that is important for us in educating brokers and consumers is what is health care? What is our premise? Okay. What is this thing we call health care? Interesting, okay? Foundation, right? Premise, superstructure, conclusion, flawed premise, flawed conclusion. And again, just interesting thoughts, but thoughts that make sense and thoughts that I think belong inside of our conversation. So here we are, free market medicine, the FMMA, right? The rock stars, in my opinion, of real healthcare reform. And again, I cannot tell you how honored I am to be with you, and how much esteem my colleagues and I have for everybody that is doing what you do to bring transparency and reform to the marketplace. Thank you. So free market medicine rests on a solid foundation. What is it? Well, number one, you have a patient. Okay? What is a patient? Somebody who has a problem. They have dis-ease of some sort. Okay, whatever it is. I threw my shoulder out of whack in Whistler, British Columbia, ziplining with my daughter who just graduated. She's an athlete, right? Kate, what do you want to do? Well, I mean, we could have done something real, simple, like a walk in the woods and look for the bears on a guided. No, we want to zip line. So anyway, but I had a problem, right? I was a patient, and I went to my doc, and she began to solve my dis-ease. So in free market medicine, you have one who seeks or needs care, and then you have the caregiver, one who is skilled at solving the problem. And again, I think it needs to be as simple as possible. And I think that as we educate brokers and brokers educate the consumer, it's important for people to understand like this simple relationship and how simple and pure and good it can be. What a travesty, if I may say this. I have had clients engage my agents and actually not know that they can seek care without an insurance card. Can you believe that in America there are people who are afraid, they're living in fear or bondage that can I seek care without an insurance card? And I think somebody referenced that earlier. That is it, can I just pay? I mean, come on. And so this is some of the challenge that we have is educating not only the broker community, but again, the broker educating the consumer that, hey, healthcare is you and your caregiver. It doesn't have to be, nor should it be, any more complicated than that. So each party, what do? They voluntarily, without force, enter into a relationship to have their specific needs and goals addressed. That's health care. That's the free market model. And again, a patient in this case has a problem. We call it dis-ease, right? Some type of pain, anomaly, challenge, broken bones, stitches, cuts, bruises, whatever. And they are the ones seeking the care. Then you have the provider who, as many of you are, is skilled in your profession to remedy that particular problem, that dis-ease. So again, this is a lot of where I start, even with brokers and agents, okay? Why? Because, myself, I've been inside of the belly of the beast since 1985. And you don't know what you don't know, if that makes sense. I feel like I drank a lot of Kool-Aid and I thought it was a certain way. I thought things were the way that they were presented to me. But over time, you begin to realize, my goodness, it is not so. It is not perhaps the way that I thought it was. Medical billing and so on and so forth. So it is important that we define these terms, in my opinion, and educate the broker to thus educate the consumer so that we can reprogram, re-educate, or start with a clean slate to eliminate some of the fear that people have of doing things differently. One of the speakers earlier today said this, that change is hard, okay? That's true, isn't it? Change is hard. And when you've grown up, grandma and grandpa had, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and you've just assumed, some of these big names, resonate with security or access. It's hard to challenge people's paradigm with this whole new concept of, hey, direct primary care requires no insurance. Insurance is not necessary. A government in this relationship is not necessary. So it is sometimes quite challenging to educate brokers, agents, and then them in turn educating the consumer. So we deal with fundamentals as far as the definitions are concerned, and I'm sharing these with you because perhaps it may help you in your specific area of expertise. Because I have found that in my own language and in some of my communication, there are things that I needed to modify, things that I needed to get rid of that slipped into my own narrative that frankly shouldn't have been there. Okay, so the free market model in free market medicine, of course, direct primary care is fundamental, right? And what do we witness in direct primary care? Now, I don't want to say I love to shop, but if I shop, I love to save money. I'm telling you, I don't like retail, okay? I like Craigslist, I like eBay. On the weekends, I like going to flea markets and stuff, and what I've learned, right, is one of the most efficient ways of purchasing a product or receiving a benefit is to cut out the middleman. Okay, go direct, right? And direct primary care, I liken it, and I hope that it offends no one because it's not meant to, but I liken direct primary care truly to the patient, being in the wholesale environment rather than the retail. Why? Because they're getting the most for the least. And at the same time, what I've learned from direct primary care physicians, this was something that was said earlier today, and before the guy answered the question, he said, how can you tell in the room who are the direct primary care physicians? And I said, they're the happy ones. And he said, they're the ones that have the ear-to-ear smile. And you can tell, like I see in my own doc's world, she's happy. She's happy when I come. She's happy when I go. She's happy while she's telling me, that every can of beer is like eating a pork chop, right? But but it's a great relationship. So I look at the free market model and direct primary care. It's just such a wonderful model that, again, our goal is to promote it and educate as much as we can throughout. So here's something funny. I will tell you, and I'm proud to say this, I've worked hard at it. Philadelphia American has a lot of distribution channels. Our distribution channel, New Era Health Plans, is the #1 distribution channel right now in the United States of America, right? So we're doing a good job, all right? I have some great people on my team. I'm an insurance executive. I've been in this, I didn't want to be in insurance. I wanted to be a rock star when I graduated high school. That's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to be a drummer in a rock band for the rest of my life. I find myself married, a baby on the way, and I'm getting into the insurance industry. It was more by default than definition. It was like, well, until I figured out what I want to do, Metropolitan Life hired me, which was the 3 most miserable years of my career. And it wasn't they were not the problem. I was wet behind the ears and full of bananas. I was just too young, But I got into health insurance in '88 and have always done things a little differently. We were kind of like the A.L. Williams of health insurance. I always sold catastrophic health and taught people how to take a high deductible, pay cash for the small stuff, and insure against the big stuff. And we did tons of business in that model. But what I'm saying today, is that we're not necessary. And believe it or not, I tell my division leaders and my regional leaders and my district leaders and my agents, you're not necessary. And you should tell the consumer that, because the consumer should know that we're not as important as they think so. And honestly, since we began telling that story and educating the consumer and the broker community in that way, my sales have gone up, because I think truth is a powerful thing. Okay? So here I am speaking to you as somebody in the belly of the beast, the insurance gig, and I see it today quite differently, how that the traditional major medical model, the third-party payer system, it is behind that veil that a lot of these shenanigans that you guys are exposing and that we now see, that's where the mold can grow, okay? And I see that it's been a bigger part of the problem, perhaps, than the solution. And it's interesting that not only are we doing this throughout the United States, but there are other companies that are catching on and beginning to share this message. Okay, but let's talk about where we are and where we've come from. Health insurance, back in the day, I live in Western PA, big coal mining, big steel area. And back in the day, I remember my grandpa, who was a World War I veteran, my dad a World War II veteran. They called it hospitalization. How many of you have ever heard that, right? We got a job and our benefits are hospitalization. And the truth is that's where it began. And that's about all that it covered. It didn't cover every sniffle, hiccup, nosebleed, wellness, happiness, and it wasn't priced that way. What it was like a bucket of money that indemnified the consumer, so that if something happened that the consumer could not pay cash for, they could rely on this hospitalization to keep them out of the weeds, right? That's where we began, to cover the claim that was out of reach for the average Joe. It covered facility fees. It covered certain professional fees. It was limited outpatient testing and therapy. Not unlike when Medicare started, there was Part A. That was hospital. They didn't even have Part B right out of the gate, right? Because back in the day, it was very affordable to seek a doctor or pay for an office visit, these types of things. So limited outpatient testing and therapy. It was affordable. It was usually first dollar. It included no relationship, right, between provider and insurance company. You can go anywhere. Any doc, any hospital, anywhere. I remember even early in my career in 1988, that's how catastrophic or even major medical work. There were no PPOs, EPOs, HMOs. They were the exception rather than the rule. And I can't tell you that I was aware of any of them living in Baltimore, Maryland at that time. It simply indemnified the patient, the consumer, for things that were out of reach for the common man. It was useful, it was reasonable, and it was fair. Okay, and it was optional, right? You didn't have to have it. If you didn't want it, no big deal. The faith-based model, which is where we want to get to, the faith-based model, different from a commercial insurance company, operates in a similar fashion. Okay, now again, it's interesting that I'm from Western PA, and if you've ever visited Pennsylvania, I met Tina here, one of our brokers who lives in Lancaster, right? And Tina, my daughter, graduated from Westminster University in New Wilmington near Voland, and every time I would go see Caitlin, it would be very common to see Amish or Mennonite people in buggies, right? It's an amazing culture. But this faith-based model, they don't use insurance. Like they don't believe in it. They don't want it. I've had agents call on these people, fine human beings, wonderful people, trying to sell them insurance. They're like, dude, we don't want your insurance. We do it another way. And their way is basically, it's a perfect example of the premise upon which, in my opinion, the premise upon which the Christian sharing ministries rest. And that model is they simply help one another in a covenant relationship, okay? It's an agreement. It's we're going to take care of one another. That's what they do. They don't need insurance. They don't need contracts. They don't need Christian sharing ministries, okay? Nothing wrong with any of those. But I bring up the Pennsylvania Dutch or the Amish as an example of a thriving community, a productive community, who says, we will do things a different way. We will take care of one another. So the Christian sharing model, okay, which has been out there for a long time, okay, they're becoming quite popular post-Obamacare because of the challenges brought to the marketplace through the Affordable Care Act, and there are many, right? Quite a few challenges. But Christian sharing ministries, which pre-existed Obamacare, basically they are an organization that facilitates sharing of health care costs among individual members who have common ethical or religious beliefs. A healthcare sharing ministry does not use actuaries, does not accept risk or make guarantees. Members of a Healthshare ministry are exempt from the individual responsibility requirements of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. So what is a health share ministry? Well, it's a great idea, number one. Number two, they're usually quite affordable. Number three, it's very similar to a cash pay environment. In other words, and I'm a member of a Christian sharing ministry. And if I were relying on that Christian, like if I were hospitalized, I would posture potentially, and I have some different choices and options as anybody does, cash pay, but I would posture as a cash pay client, right? In a Christian sharing ministry, basically, I am in a covenant relationship with this organization that says, Tom, we have certain levels of membership, good, better, best, or gold, silver, or bronze, silver, platinum, whatever they want to call it. And each legitimate Christian sharing ministry is going to have a slightly different, twist or marketing schematic. But at the end of the day, what you do is you give them an amount of money each month in return for a covenant relationship that if something bad happens, they're going to share these bills with me, okay? Pretty simple, isn't it? Very simple. And the beauty to this premise is, again, freedom of choice. As a member of a Christian sharing ministry, I can go to any hospital, any doctor, anywhere in America, from Maine to California. I can go, if I'm an educated consumer, right, I can go to the Oklahoma Surgery Center. And everybody wins because the care is going to be high, the cost's going to be low. My out-of-pocket, if there was any, So it presents a model to the faith-based community that is fantastic, fantastic. It's just different. And that's the other thing, one of them, I think it was Dr. Gross earlier said, that there is some fear and there is some confusion among consumers about, like, okay, can I trust this or not? Is it going to work? Because again, if you go to an outpatient surgery facility or you go to a hospital and you present your Christian sharing ministry card, Bell at the front desk is going to look at you and go, what is that? We do not take this. We have not seen it. So you have to be able to withstand being different, right? Because it's different. It's not the same. It's not Cigna or Aetna or Blue Cross. It's different. It's not insurance. How about that? It's not insurance. It's a membership in as I said, a covenant relationship, okay, with an organization that has promised to indemnify you according to the terms of your agreement. Now, Christian sharing ministries, and we'll drill down on some of the specifics here. Again, I'm a marketing guy, okay? Now, I can read Wikipedia quotes, and I can, I do my level best to tell you the truth, I promise. And I think I've done a good job here. But we'll look at the following requirements, and this was given to me to give to you. To receive an exemption under the rules of the Affordable Care Act. I think it's IRS code 5187, but double check me on that. Number one, they have to be a 501c3 organization, right? Number two, members must share common ethical or religious beliefs. Number three, they must not discriminate membership based upon state of residence or employment. They must have existed and been in practice continually since December 31st, 1999. There's a grandfather clause, okay? Under the Obamacare rule, under the Affordable Care Act law, this exemption, think about it, the individual mandate presents a big problem to people in the working middle class who are being forced to buy these horrible major medical plans with huge deductibles and very high premiums, right? And it's such a good deal, the government says, that if you don't buy it, what do you get? You get a penalty, right? So the fact that Christian sharing ministries have been granted this exemption, I believe that the law said, well, what we don't want is we don't want a whole lot of also-rans cropping up post-passage of the Affordable Care Act law. Let's call them illegitimate sharing ministries. So these points that I'm bringing in front of you, in particular, this one here, number 4, must have existed and been in practice continually since December 31st, is key. And this might be a good time for me to mention, like anything, and I'm a free market guy. I believe in competition, and the more I learn about the free market, the more free market I'm becoming, okay? It's amazing. But what they're saying is that there's some legitimacy to the vetted existing Christian sharing ministries, and what I would warn you is that I think that there are some companies cropping up post the passage of Obamacare that might be led or run by unscrupulous marketers who are selling something and promising something that at the end of the day they cannot deliver on, okay? And that's interesting. Meg and I had a chat about some challenges that she had run into with other group members, I think, or other brokers or other employers that had been approached by so-called Christian sharing ministries that frankly I'd never heard of, that may or may not truly pass this test. But these are the requirements of the Christian sharing ministry in terms of receiving a legitimate exemption from the individual mandate. And what a powerful thing that is. That's huge, you know. It gives me the ability to say, no, I do not want Obamacare, and no, I do not have to take or pay a penalty, okay? That's powerful. I like that. It's a get out of jail free card. I'm out of the penalty box. But again, I'm with a legitimate organization that passes muster with everything that I just shared with you. Now, Christian sharing ministries, here's another cool thing about them. They are in harmony with the free market, right? And again, to just reiterate, membership in a Christian sharing ministry is in perfect harmony with direct primary care. Let me give you an example. The membership that I belong to has a $5,000 per illness or per injury member responsibility, okay? Now, in the insurance world where I grew up, we'd call that what? A deductible. But in Christian sharing world, they stay away from traditional insurance nomenclature because they're not what? They're not insurance. So I have this $5,000 member responsibility. In other words, it's not going to cover preventative, sniffles, hiccups, headaches. You know, it's not going to do any of that. So part of my healthcare risk management strategy, which is what we educate brokers to educate consumers about, what we're doing is we're managing risk, right? I have a $100 a month subscription to Paragon Personal Health Care. So my doctor visits, my preventative, when she wants to draw blood through using Quest Diagnostics, I'm not sending those bills to Christian Healthshare. Okay, I'm not doing that. My bills, my direct primary care relationship with Dr. Rebecca Plouffe, that's taking care of all of that. And I can easily afford that because I'm not paying $1,600 a month for some horrific Obamacare plan. Does that make sense? So the Christian sharing ministries, not all of them, some of them have very low deductibles and will reimburse for the doctor visits. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right. It's just never been my model. I've never been one to purchase insurance for things that are relatively affordable to pay cash for. It doesn't make sense to me, right? But the Christian sharing model can and does work in harmony with direct primary care, right? Why? It does not violate, manipulate, I like this word, or obfuscate, right? The patient-provider relationship. There's no hidden agenda. I mean, you know what they're going to do, you know when they're going to do it, and you know what it's going to cost you. It offers a useful exemption from the government overreach found in the Affordable Care Act. Also, we call it the individual mandate, right? In the land of the free and the home of the brave. Imagine that. Individual mandate. Isn't that something? I mean, when I sit and think about that at times, which is why I probably today describe myself as a Christian anarchist, okay? Because it's like, I'm the guy that grew up, I tell you when, just to get off the beaten track for a minute, when you remember the 9/11 movement and some of, the early patriot movements. One of my favorite documents is George Washington's farewell address. Has anybody ever read that? If you've never read it, read it again for the first time. I mean, I bet I've read it 10 times, and I would get up in front of people and speak on components of that particular address. And there's a lot of reasons why it means so much to me. But I'm the guy that actually grew up believing, wow, we're the freest of the free and we're the best and make America great again. Because, hey, I grew up with, as I said, a grandfather, World War I, father, World War II. They were good people. And you want to believe these things. But today, I tell you, I look at our country and I look at the laws that are encroaching on us and the loss of individual liberties, and this individual mandate deal is one of them. I just find it repulsive. It's a travesty. And I'm ashamed in some respects that the insurance industry has allowed this to happen, if they did in fact, and I think that they were in collusion with the government in a form of crony capitalism or what have you. But at any rate, back to the good news, the Christian Sharing Ministry, it's in harmony with free market. It works so well with direct primary care. In other words, you're resting on this for the big stuff, if the big stuff happens. And what's even better news is with a proper relationship, with a high-quality patient-provider relationship, we mitigate the risk of the big stuff actually happening because you have that great relationship with a doc. You see, so, boy, I'll tell you, it just provides an affordable mechanism to protect members from risk, which may be catastrophic financially. Okay, and that's really what they are. Now, something that was said earlier today, and I'm not here to pick on Christian Sharing Ministries, any of them. As I said, I'm a member. So my strongest endorsement to anything is that if I opened up my wallet, you would find a card to which I belong to one of these, right? So that's a pretty strong endorsement. I'm a believer. My money goes there, right? But here's some things that you're going to run into. Invariably, we run into it all the time in the broker community. Brokers run into it all the time in dealing with consumers, and the fear with consumers is what? Because membership in a Christian Sharing Ministry is not a fully insured product, right? There's no protection or oversight from the state insurance department. And that's a legitimate concern. I don't know how big of a concern, but you will hear it. If you introduce this to people in your community, or you are educating people in the areas that you serve, you're going to hear some pushback and people with these various fears, okay? Because it is not a fully insured product, it is not covered by any state guarantee fund. In other words, an individual medical product, Shifting Sands of New Mexico or Cheese Whiz Mutual or whatever, if they go defunct, the policy holders of that particular product are guaranteed through the State Department of Insurance, through the various states where those products are filed, that there is some recourse, some protection over and above that commercial or private insurance company. Because it's not a fully insured product, the normal fallback federal regulatory agency, which is the Department of Labor, has no jurisdiction or oversight. Therefore, complaints lodged here may go unheard or unresolved, okay? I hear that a lot as I'm introducing this concept to brokers. Well, I don't know, man, I don't want to recommend this. And again, it's not sold, it's not insurance, so agents or brokers are not selling it, but agents or brokers are educating consumers about it, okay, as they should. But these are some of the concerns. Because of the market pressures in place currently, many spurious, and I mentioned this earlier, and questionable models have been and are being introduced into the marketplace. So what? Buyer beware. Okay, everybody out there that's saying, hey, we're a legit Christian Sharing Ministry, check and double check. Okay, know the rules to the road and check and double check. I can say this in good conscience. And I'm not here to promote or endorse or take away from anybody on this page, but I can say that Christian Healthshare Ministries of Barberton, Ohio, they're a presenter with us out in the hallway. They are, in my opinion, the cream of the crop, the pick of the litter. Okay, great organization, been around a long time. They pass muster, they pay claims, they are affordable, and they do an outstanding job. Okay? Another is Medishare, and I think they were here last year. And I believe another is Samaritan, and I believe they were here last year. And then, of course, there's Liberty Healthshare, which I think is kind of maybe a little newer deal, but I am told that they're legit and that they are worthy of somebody's money and or trust. But these four here, I can say in good conscience that if you're endorsing or educating or steering clients to check this out, I think that your patient, your client, your friend, your neighbor, your relative would have good results with any of them. Okay? So as we land the plane, in closing, right? Which is, as a speaker, you know, when you hear somebody say, okay, now we're closing, I'm always suspect of that. But in closing, my organization, I said to my son, he's like, Dad, what are you talking on? By the way, my son's here, Neil Yakopin. What a great kid. What a privilege to be in business with your own offspring. And very proud of it. But he said, so what are you talking on? And I said, you know, Christian sharing ministries in the free market. He's like, oh. I said, well, they didn't ask me to get up and do an infomercial on New Era health plans. And I'm here to educate and share. And that's really what I hope that we're doing. But my organization, just in closing, exists to do what? To educate the broker community and the consumer about legal, affordable alternatives to traditional major medical insurance. Let me give you an example of why I'm so passionate about this. In my little town, I graduated from Canon McMillan High School with some dear friends, and we had a young lady that I went to school with named Vicki Hildebrand. Now her name's Andres. And she was, I'm a musician, and she was a fantastic singer, songwriter. She was the front person of possibly one of the, you know, the best rock and roll bands in the Pittsburgh area back in the day. And I always idolized her, just loved her. Great human being. And she, you know, she's gone on. She's married. Her husband, Richie, has a great construction company. And she's an accountant. She's built a nice, you know, tax prep business and so on and so forth. Her kids are now out of the house. I think she insures one of them. But she called our retail agency this year and said, hey, Tom, I need to talk to you or one of your agents. And I said, well, sure, Vic, what's up? She says, well, I'll tell you when I get in. So she comes into the office and she sits down, a very intelligent girl. I mean, she's a numbers girl. She's got more common sense than most anybody I know. And she says, my premiums on this big box insurance plan are going to $1,600 a month. And my deductible's going to $6,500 for me and $6,500 for Richie. And that's not including additional out-of-pocket costs. And that's our best case scenario. Our worst case scenario is if we go out of network, it gets even uglier. She said, I'm done. I'm done with this. I don't care about the pen. I don't care about any of this. And that's what's happening in the middle class. If you're poor, and there are some legitimate poor people in the United States. You know that, I know it, we both know that. But there are a lot of scammers that are posturing as broke, right? And they're getting subsidies which create the illusion that this Obamacare, these major medical plans are affordable. So if you're here and you're getting government money, subsidies, right, which is the government taking money from the producer and giving it to this one, you're okay. But if you're in the working middle class, this is what's happening to people, the self-employed, the mom and pop shops, the individuals all over America. And this is why we are so passionate at New Era Health Plans. This is why I'm so passionate about what I do, because we're hearing and we're seeing change all across the United States. So we're teaching people about legal, moral, affordable alternatives. And what I ran into is you guys. I would have been doing this if I had never watched the video. How many of you have seen the video on Reason TV, Oklahoma Surgery Center versus Obamacare? Okay, how many have seen that? My gosh, if you have never seen it, I should have showed it today. I bet I've shown that video 1,000 times. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. And I now teach brokers, okay, show this video to the consumer. Because it's a platform upon which we can launch this discussion and begin to expose the fraud, the phony baloney shenanigans that are going on behind the veil of the traditional third-party payer. We endorse, my company endorses, we educate Christian sharing ministries. We are not a Christian sharing ministry. We're a marketing agency affiliated with an insurance company. But I can train brokers what I know, and those brokers can educate the consumer. And here's what's cool. What's cool is, like in my neck of the woods around Paragon Personal Health Care, as we educate consumers, guess where we recommend they go? If you walked into my office, Paragon Personal Health Care has a brochure right on the front desk, and everybody that comes in gets one, because we want them to know about a better way, and that's you guys and gals. That's what we do. We sell high-end, fully insured products which create cash at claim time. And this is consistent with the direct primary care free market model, as it affords additional layers of protection to the consumer, enabling them to make better choices in the time of need, including loss of wages, travel, and more. How many of you have ever heard of indirect medical costs, right? There's medical costs, the docs, the hospitals, facility, whatever, but then there's the indirect medical cost as well. That's the loss of wages. That could be getting on a plane. That could be a consumer going, man, I'd love to go to Epiphany Health in Florida, or I'd love to go to the Oklahoma Surgery Center, but man, I don't know. I would miss work. I would have to fly. I would incur hotel costs. Well, what we do is we create the cash so that person can plan a better strategy, get on the plane, afford to fly there, stay in the Skirvin, file the claim, pay cash, be reimbursed by my company, and probably be miles ahead of the game, okay? And in closing, again, we believe that this is consistent with free market. So that's what I do. Again, I'm not a Christian sharing ministry. I am a member of one. We endorse them. We think they're fantastic for the faith-based community. Not everybody likes them. Not everybody would qualify for them. So we have some other cool and creative alternatives. If you want to learn more, I would ask you to visit my table. But having said that, I believe that that's the end of my slideshow. If we have questions or comments.
Yeah, you can't get out of answering questions.
Thank you.
My name's Herb Raymond Schneider. My question is this. If one day we wake up and the swamp is empty, and yes, I'll take the responsibility for voting for him, what happens to this?
What happens to this? Is that what happens to Christian sharing?
Yes.
Okay, so the Christian sharing concept pre-existed Obamacare. I do not see any change. I would see no change in their normal operating agreement. I don't think anything would change.
I think a couple of things to note with the healthcare sharing ministries. To add, one of them, Liberty Healthshare, shares in DPC costs before the annual out-of-pocket. So I think that's kind of important, up to a certain amount depending on the type of DPC. Also, three of the healthcare sharing ministries use Medibid to get their medical care, but two of them use PHCS network. One of them, the physician only, one of them, the full network, which is MediShare. And because of that, their costs are about twice as much as any of the other ministries because they use that PPO network.
Very good. And of course, what that does, is you guys know, a consumer can go inside of that network, and rather than being gouged too bad, you know, they're getting wholesale prices. Of course, the question then, and this is something I learned last year, a discount off of what, right? That's the scam of the PPO, right? It's a discount, but off of what? Questions or comments? Any other questions?
Thank you. I'm an employer, and I've been working with Jay Kempton and Dr. Keith Smith on direct contracting. And as I discuss this model with other employers, what is it about the broker community that causes them to be somewhat scared of this situation? What is it about them that they are afraid of?
Okay. Zig Ziglar defines fear this way: false evidence appearing real. And brokers and agents, right? Like I said, I went from being a drummer in a metal band called Assassin to, cutting my hair off, which was down to my middle of my back, leather pants, a red earring. All of a sudden, I'm an insurance broker. And they train you their narrative, and they teach you to color inside the lines. This is how we do it, and anything other than this, you need to question and be afraid of. That's the best answer I have for you, because I was there, and I'm kind of like the movie The Matrix. I feel like, I'm pulling the plugs out. I don't know that they're all out yet, but I'm waking up going, wow, this is not at all what I thought it was. And I think that's where these guys are at. They don't know. And a lot of them are making a good living doing what they're doing. And so what? Change is hard. Don't mess with my deal, because we do it this way, and I do not want to do it that way. I'm afraid of doing it that way. What might happen, and we hear it all the time. So I would just say it's fear, and it's fear based upon a non-reality. Okay, questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you for your talk. What I was wondering first was, how do you vet the individuals that supposedly say they adhere to the tenets of whatever the healthcare sharing ministry puts forth?
I don't, okay? And this is where educating our broker, our field force very carefully, to make it, my responsibility goes like this. To a licensed agent, I say this: if you're going to educate consumers about MediShare, Samaritan, Christian healthcare, you can go as far as saying, hey, these organizations exist. These are the tenets of membership. Go to their website. If you qualify, enroll. We think it's a great idea. If you don't qualify, be honest. As far as I know, these organizations are not policing. I don't think they're sending anybody to the house going, do you go to church Wednesday night? I don't think they're doing that. I don't think it would be, they're not going to do that. So it's a covenant relationship. The very nature of the Christian sharing organization is built again on a premise of trust, like, thou shalt not lie, right? Okay. Right? That's fair. Any other questions or comments?
Tom, one question. So could you talk about how insurance regulators are responding to sharing ministries?
I don't know that I'm qualified to speak to that. I can say that the Christian sharing ministries have functioned well prior to Obamacare. They are functioning well after. My guess is that there are regulators and legislators who would like them to go away, so they probably really need to keep their nose clean. But that's not my field of expertise, so I would avoid that.
Could you speak to how you would handle an employer that's over 50 employees compared to one under 50 employees, and what type of advice would you offer? Like your friend who came and spoke with you, never quite finished that story, but
What was that? My
she
friend.
came in and had $1,600 a month.
Oh yeah, well I solved her problem.
$500
Yeah,
deductible, and how many employees did they have?
It was just her and Richie, and I think the one child. So here's the other thing, and I don't want to avoid your question, but everybody's at 10 somewhere. My space is 50 and under. I would say talking to Jay Kempton or somebody that's expert in that field would be you'd get a better answer than asking me that, because I'm not sure. I believe that it can be done, but I would defer to somebody that's expert in that area.
Got one last question,
Yes,
I think, in the back.
I have a simple question. When you refer somebody to Christian Care, Medishare, Samaritan, or one of these, how much commission do you make?
None.
So maybe that's the answer why none of the brokers are doing it.
Well, it is, okay? It is, you know, and yet keep in mind, you know, the brokers, like for example, the broker can sell a crisis recovery plan that creates cash on diagnosis of something significant. An example might be heart attack, stroke, cancer. We might pay up to 50 grand to that consumer upon diagnosis, which creates enough cash flow for them to weather the storm, deal with indirect medical. So the broker can make money. In fact, we have brokers making more money with this model selling ancillary, non-qualified hospital, surgical, enhanced accident, fully insured dental plan. The brokers are doing fine. I don't think that's really the issue. I think they're just afraid, you know, more than anything, okay? And with that, I want to thank you for your time. And again, any questions, you know, we'll be at the booth myself. We've got Mark Dunn from Atlanta. Mark, thanks for coming up. Terry Bush from Draper, Utah. My son, Neil Yakopin, and others. We're here to help you any way we can. Thank you very much.